They sat me at table 17, near the kitchen, next to the emergency exit. The kind of table where the music is muffled, the flowers are wilted, and the waiters push by every few minutes with empty trays and tired smiles. Have you ever been pushed to the edge, not by strangers, but by your own family? If that's ever happened to you, drop a comment. You're not alone. And if stories like this make you feel seen, hit subscribe. We've got more to tell. I didn't ask why. I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I looked around the ballroom. High ceilings wrapped in golden chandeliers, white roses floating in tall crystal vases, laughter echoing like polished glass. Everyone dressed in silk and silver, toasting to a love story they were proud to witness. But me? I sat at the edge of it all, forgotten, unspoken, brushed into a corner like the edge of an old photo nobody frames. A young server leaned down beside me. Her voice was polite, careful. "Excuse me, sir, are you with the bride's side?" I smiled. "Something like that." She nodded and left. I could feel her glance linger just a second too long, like she knew I didn't belong here. Not in this light. Not in this room. And maybe she was right. My name is David Min Turner. I'm 38 years old. Major General, United States Army. Director of Cyber Defense Strategy. But tonight, I'm just the older brother. The one no one really talks about anymore. The one who never came back. Across the room, on an elevated stage lit in soft amber, I saw my father raise his champagne flute. Tall, stern, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that cost more than my monthly operations budget. He spoke with the ease of a man who had always been listened to. "My son," he said, gesturing to Brandon, "is the future of this family. CFO of Turner Tech, the sharpest mind I've ever known, and now a husband. May this be the first of many victories together." The room erupted in applause. I didn't join, just lifted my water glass in silence. The bitterness on my tongue had nothing to do with the drink. He hadn't even glanced toward my table. Not once. I stared at Brandon. Flawless tuxedo, flawless smile, his arm around Emily's waist. He looked every bit the role they'd written for him. The golden son. The heir. And I was the chapter they redacted. I reached down, ran my fingers along the edge of my ring. West Point, class of 2009. Steel cold, heavy. It pressed into my skin like a memory I couldn't shake. "Is that the brother?" A voice whispered behind me. "The one in the army? He's still doing that. Could have been rich too, you know. Shame." I didn't turn around. Words don't bruise skin, but they leave fingerprints somewhere deeper. I took a breath, slow, controlled, not out of patience, out of habit. Then I heard it. "Major General Turner." I looked up. Colonel Anderson stood at attention beside me. Full-dress blues, ribbons across his chest, eyes sharp as ever. He and I had faced things most people in this room couldn't pronounce. Cyber warfare units, black ops, systems failures no one ever heard about because we never let them get that far. He saluted. "Sir, an honor." I stood. We shook hands. The entire table fell into stunned silence. Forks paused mid-air. A woman clutched her pearl necklace a little tighter. A man 3 seats over muttered, "General?" Another leaned in. "Wait, he's military? Anderson offered a warm smile. "Didn't think I'd run into you here, sir. Wasn't expecting it to be this kind of battlefield." I gave him the faintest smile. "Different kind of war, Colonel." He chuckled, saluted again, and left. The silence didn't stay long. Conversations resumed. Talk of IPOs, lake houses, and which honeymoon destinations were worth flying private for. My presence faded again, just a flicker on their radar, easily dismissed. But one person had noticed. My mother. She stood in the far corner of the ballroom, near a flower arrangement that towered above her small frame. She was in a soft gray dress, elegant, understated. Her silver hair pulled into a low bun. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw something I hadn't seen since I was a boy. Longing, regret, love, fighting its way through layers of silence. I nodded. She didn't smile, just blinked. That was enough. Later that night, after the cake had been cut, the dances danced, and the speeches made, I walked alone out onto the hotel balcony. The city stretched out beneath me, steel and glass, lights blinking like a circuit board in the dark. And I thought of something I hadn't let myself remember in years. The night my father made his decision. I was 18. I had just turned down his offer to join Turner Tech. I had looked him in the eye and said, "I want to serve. I'm going to enlist." He didn't yell, didn't argue. He just said one sentence that changed everything. "Then I'll make the call. Let the military straighten you out. Let them teach you what it means to follow orders." I didn't know what he meant. Not then. But 2 weeks later, I received a formal appointment, not just to basic training, but to an elite military cyber program I hadn't applied to. He had pulled strings, quietly, brutally. Not because he believed in me, but because he wanted to break me. He wanted me to come home humbled, shattered, grateful to be let back into his world. What he didn't expect was that I would thrive there, that I would find a new family, that the army wouldn't crush me, it would raise me, and that one day I'd stand in front of his company, not as the son he tried to exile, but as the man who held their future in his hands. The next morning, I woke before the city, not from alarm, from instinct. The kind of wakefulness that never really sleeps. Years in command taught me that. I sat on the edge of the bed in my rented apartment, a modest place near Arlington. White walls, military-issue desk, not a trace of luxury. But every corner was mine, and every silence was earned. Steam curled from my coffee as I looked out the window at the gray skyline. Then I turned to the folder on the table. Atlas Shield, Final Clearance Review, Top Secret, Final Phase, billions in defense contracts, and Turner Tech's entire future, waiting on one signature. Mine. They didn't know I was coming. Turner Tech expected a Pentagon rep, someone official, detached. Not me. Not the son they had stopped inviting to family dinners. Not the ghost. But they were about to find out. I dressed in my Class A uniform. No medals. Just bars and insignia. Nothing flamboyant. Just the truth. Pressed, polished, undeniable. I checked my phone before leaving. No calls, no messages. Still invisible. But not for long. At exactly 9:47 a.m., I stepped into the Turner Tech headquarters. It hadn't changed. Same glass columns, same steel logo gleaming over the lobby like a corporate monument to ambition, precision, power, progress. I used to walk through these doors as a teenager in sneakers. Today, I walked in wearing stars on my shoulder. A young receptionist stood when she saw me. Her eyes widened slightly. "Major General Turner?" I nodded. "They're expecting me." 45th floor, boardroom." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. I was used to that. Uniforms change how people speak. The elevator was silent. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Still me, but harder now. Tired in places only I could see. The kind of tired that doesn't rest. It remembers. The boardroom opened with a hiss of hydraulics. 12 seats, floor-to-ceiling glass, a table long enough to host 12 egos and 2 lawyers. At the head sat Robert Callahan, chairman of the board, one of the few men in this building I respected. He stood as I entered, extending his hand. "Good to see you again, Will," I nodded. "Likewise, sir." He turned to the others. "Everyone, this is Major General David M. Turner, the officer overseeing final clearance on Project Atlas Shield." You could hear it. The inhale, the mental brakes slamming. My father turned first. His eyes scanned the uniform, paused on the stars, then landed on my face like he couldn't decide whether to speak or stand. He chose neither. Brandon was slower, but when recognition hit, he blinked like the floor had dropped under him. "David." I didn't answer. I took my seat, opened the folder, flattened my palms on the table. Professional, controlled, unshakable. "We'll begin." The next hour moved in precision. I questioned code vulnerabilities. I flagged inconsistencies in vendor vetting. I highlighted a red flag, a $47 million route through a Singapore shell corporation labeled Auxiliary Innovation. Brandon flinched. It was a consolidation," he stammered. "An attempt to streamline research flow." I looked up. "Do you have results? Documentation? Internal memos?" He paused, looked toward our father. My father didn't look back. I took a breath. If this were any other firm, I would have issued a hold on contract progression. But this isn't just any firm. I reached into my case, pulled out a sealed envelope, unmarked, laid it gently on the table. Robert leaned forward. "What's that?" I unfolded it with deliberate care. "A memo from the Department of Defense. 3 years ago, Turner Tech experienced a breach, a category red, critical threat, internal systems compromised, patched in 3 hours, no source ever identified, no credit claimed." I slid the final sheet toward my father. He stared at it, reading slowly. Then his fingers froze. Robert's voice dropped. "Wait, that was you?" I nodded. "I didn't want recognition. I didn't want headlines. I just didn't want you to lose federal security clearance, so I handled it." Brandon sat back in his chair, pale. You were the one who stopped that attack? But why?" I looked at him. Calm. "Because even when you forgot I existed, I never forgot who I was." The silence was long, thick. My father finally spoke, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I sent you there. You didn't even want to go. I forced it." He didn't look at me as he said it, just into space, like he was speaking to a version of himself only he could see. "I thought, if the army broke you down, maybe you'd come back obedient, humbled, hungry to be part of something real." He paused, swallowed. "But it didn't break you, did it?" I met his eyes. "No, it built me." I stood. "This company has one chance left to fix its house. Brandon, you have 48 hours to resubmit every financial line item, transparent, justified. If you do, I'll let the contract move forward. If not, I'll terminate it personally." Brandon nodded, stunned. No argument, no protest. My father said nothing, until I turned to leave. "David." I paused at the door. He looked up, eyes rimmed in something he couldn't name. I was wrong. That was all. But it was enough to stop me, not in my tracks, but in my chest. I gave him one nod, then walked out. Not as a soldier, not as a son, but as the man they never saw coming. Outside the boardroom, the city was still the same. Cars moved like blood through the arteries of downtown. People clutched phones and coffee, blind to what had just cracked open 45 stories above them. I stood in the lobby a long moment, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. It wasn't victory I felt. It was release. Not because I had won, but because I hadn't needed to anymore. I returned to my apartment that night. A quiet one-bedroom near the Pentagon. No art on the walls, no furniture that wasn't necessary. A place made for function, not comfort. I dropped the folder on my desk and sat in the dark for a while. Boots still on, jacket still buttoned. My phone buzzed. A message from Robert. "You did more for them than they'll ever understand. For what it's worth, the board respects the hell out of you." A moment later, another notification. From an unknown number. "You were brilliant today. I watched the live feed. I cried. Please, come home, just dinner, no pressure." Mom. My hands trembled just enough to feel it. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding myself still. The next morning, I took the long way to the estate. The Turner family home sat at the edge of the city. Part modernist fortress, part glass museum. Too cold to be called home, but too beautiful to ignore. I hadn't stepped foot inside in almost a decade. The gates opened as my car approached, still coded to my license plate. I wasn't sure if that was intentional or an oversight. Either way, I drove through. The gravel under the tires made the same crunching sound it always had. Funny, the things you remember. Not voices, not birthdays, just the sound of gravel and silence. I parked, stepped out, took a long breath. It smelled like rain and eucalyptus. Inside, the house looked unchanged. Polished floors, tall ceilings, portraits on the wall. I recognized them all, except one. In the center of the mantel, between a Forbes cover of my father and a Wharton graduation photo of Brandon, there was a new frame. Black, minimal, backlit by soft light. Inside, a photo of me, in full dress uniform, shaking hands with the NATO Secretary General. I stared at it, didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. Then I heard a voice behind me. "He put it up last night." I turned. My mother stood in the hallway, hands clasped, eyes tired but warm. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't tight. It wasn't dramatic, but it was the first time she'd hugged me in 10 years. And I let myself hold on. Later, we sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. She brewed tea the old way, no pods, no machines, just loose leaves and patience. The scent filled the space with something that wasn't nostalgia exactly, more like memory softened by time. "He didn't sleep," she said softly. "After you left yesterday, he sat in that office for hours, didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the screen with your name on the clearance file." She stirred her tea without drinking it. "I told him once that he would lose both sons if he wasn't careful." He laughed. Yesterday, he cried. I didn't say anything. There were no words that didn't feel too small for that kind of truth. She reached into the drawer and pulled out an envelope, handed it to me. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, stiff strokes, black ink. "David." I thought I knew what strength looked like. I was wrong. I thought power was loud. You taught me it can be quiet. I thought you needed fixing. But you were the only one who stayed whole. I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. Dad, I folded the letter slowly, pressed my hand against it. Not to flatten it, but to feel that it was real. That evening, we had dinner together. Not the kind where everything is fixed, the kind where things begin. My father didn't say much, but he poured me a drink. Not like a gesture, like a recognition. Brandon arrived late. His eyes found mine quickly. There was no posturing this time, no polished grin. He walked over, pulled out the chair beside me, sat down, and said the one thing I wasn't sure I'd ever hear again. Will. Not general, not bro. Just Will. Then quieter. Thank you. I nodded once. You fixed the reports? He looked at me like he understood that wasn't the real question. I'm still fixing them, he said. But yeah, I started. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a binder, the new compliance draft. He handed it to our father. Fully transparent, clean. Our father turned a page, then another, and for the first time in my life, I saw something shift behind his eyes. Not approval, respect. After dinner, I stepped out into the backyard. Same old stone path, same quiet pool, same wind. But something felt different. My mother joined me, wrapping a light shawl over her shoulders. It's cold, she said, laying a hand on my arm. You're not as tough as you used to be. I smiled. I'm tougher than I look. She looked up at the stars, then at me. I'm proud of you, David. Not because you're a general, not because you saved anything, but because you didn't let us break you. My throat tightened. I nodded once and whispered, I didn't stay away because I hated you. I stayed away because I didn't know how to be loved by people who couldn't see me. She didn't answer. She just held my hand, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I let her. A week later, I returned to Cyber Command. Same corridors, same steel gray walls, same hum of servers and footsteps and voices low with the weight of responsibility. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in years, the silence here felt like clarity, not exile. I unlocked my office, dropped my bag. There on the shelf, right between my NATO medal and the West Point plaque, was a simple glass frame. Inside it, a letter. My mother's handwriting. Folded once, neatly, now pressed flat like memory under light. Willie? Not because you're a major general, not because of what you've achieved, but because you've never stopped being the man I'm proud to call my son. Come home anytime. Mom. I stared at it for a while, not because I hadn't read it before, but because I still didn't quite believe it existed. I remembered the nights I'd stood in this very room, surrounded by glowing monitors, deciphering lines of code meant to destroy cities, and wondering if anyone back home remembered my birthday. I remembered eating Christmas MREs in Afghanistan, watching encrypted footage of a bombing campaign I'd helped prevent, while my family posted champagne toasts online. And now, this letter sat in sunlight. That Friday, I received an internal memo from the Department of Defense. Turner Tech's contract had passed clearance. Brandon's revised reports held up. The security patch I'd coded had been quietly adopted by other defense firms, a legacy that would never carry my name publicly. That was fine. I hadn't done it to be remembered. I'd done it so the people I loved could forget how close they came to ruin. The next day, I got an email from Brandon. Subject line, "One more thing, Will." The compliance report passed. Robert said it was the cleanest file he's seen all year. I fixed what I could. The rest, I'm still learning. I wanted you to know something. That cyber breach you stopped 3 years ago? I remember that night. I was supposed to be monitoring vendor flow. I left early to go to a gala. You covered for me. I didn't know it then, but I do now. And I'm sorry. Let me buy you coffee. The one we used to ride our bikes to. I didn't reply right away. I sat with the message. Let it settle. Not as an apology, not as a plea, but as a door cracking open. That weekend, we met at the cafe. Same peeling green awning, same faded menu chalkboard, same booths with the fake leather splitting at the corners. He was already there when I arrived. Hoodie, jeans, 2 coffees on the table. Black, no sugar, he said, sliding one toward me. I remember. I sat. We didn't talk about the company or the wedding, not at first. We talked about music, about Mom's apple pie, about how Dad had started reading real books again, not just quarterly reports. Brandon leaned back, looking out the window. The afternoon light made his features softer, less like the man who once mocked me, more like the kid who used to sneak comic books into my room when I was grounded. Then he said, "You didn't just save us once. You saved us, even when we didn't deserve it." I didn't respond. I let him speak. I used to think the only way to win was to be seen, to have people clap, quote you, envy you. But you disappeared, and somehow, you became the one person who mattered most. That scares me, because it means I was wrong, for years. I looked at him, and this time, I didn't feel the ache of being misunderstood. I just felt done. Not with him, not with the past, just with carrying its weight alone. I lifted my cup, took a slow sip, then said, "I didn't want you to clap. I just wanted you to look at me without lowering your voice." Brandon's eyes glistened, and for the first time, he didn't try to fill the silence. Weeks passed. One morning, I received a company-wide memo from Turner Tech. It was addressed to all staff, from the office of the CEO. Subject: integrity. This week, we finalize one of the most significant defense partnerships in our company's history. But before that, I want to share something personal. My son, Major General David Turner, recently played a pivotal role in ensuring that partnership held up to the highest standards, not just of security, but of character. I underestimated him. I let pride speak louder than understanding. Today, I ask every team member here to remember, greatness doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears silence and stars. I'm proud of my son, not because of what he achieved, but because he did it without ever needing to be seen. Edward Turner. I didn't cry, but I closed my laptop and sat quietly for a long time. That weekend, I went home again, the real kind of home. Not marble floors or pressed suits. Home where the food burned a little, where the couch squeaked, and where my mother insisted I take the last slice of pie like I hadn't faced down nuclear threats the week before. We sat on the back porch, stars above, the old pool shimmering below. My father stepped out with 2 glasses of bourbon. He handed me one, sat beside me. For a moment, we just drank. Then he said, "You know, I didn't think I raised a soldier. I thought I lost a son." I turned to him. "You didn't lose me. You just never looked far enough to find me?" He nodded. No defense, no comeback, just acceptance. He raised his glass. To the quiet ones. I raised mine. To the ones who stayed. And we drank to that. If you've ever spent your life trying to be seen, not applauded, not worshipped, just seen, drop a comment. We read every single one, and if you felt invisible too long, hit subscribe. Some stories aren't about being remembered. They're about finally being understood.